Welcome back, everyone, to the Modern Moms Roadmap to Balance podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Nettleton, and today my guest is Ashley Kamages. She's a licensed clinical social worker with a multi-state online therapy practice that helps women with anxiety navigate life transitions and specializes with working with women in the perinatal period as well as military spouses. Outside of the therapy room, she is passionate about empowering other women and mom clinicians to build their own online therapy practices so they can have the time freedom, flexibility, and autonomy. Ashley also has her own podcast called Race to Empower that helps challenge listeners to break free of mindsets and oppressive systems that often hold us back from stepping out and creating the practices of our dreams. Outside of work, Ashley can be usually found chasing around her two wild boys and baby girl, or binging trashy reality TV shows. Man, that is also what I like to do. I also have two wild boys and a little girl, although she's in the middle, but they're all a wild tribe. And
Yeah.
what kind of trashy TV shows have you been into lately?
Oh, I'm actually like rewatching the Real Housewives of New York right now for some reason. I don't know
Okay.
why I got on that kick, but like I I found in my this postpartum with baby number three, like it's just been
Mm.
so intense with three kids that
Oh
I
yeah.
don't have the mental capacity for anything that's like really, needs my
Mm.
devote attention. So like any
Yeah.
kind of reality show that, all the Bravo shows, all of the, ones that people like cringe at, but you're like deep inside, you're like, this is so entertaining, right?
Yes.
It's
Oh my
just kind of
gosh.
where I've
Yes.
been.
That's hilarious. Because the all of those raunchy Netflix shows,
Yes.
those are my jams. I love watching them, and my husband will walk in and he'll like give me this look like, "What are you watching?" And
Yes.
he likes to joke and tell everyone that I can literally watch anything, and I almost can watch anything, but I just like TV in general.
Yeah, yeah, it's an escape. It's an escape. I know you work in mental health as well as I do, and I think
Hmm.
sometimes like the trashy TV shows are like a little bit of an escape where I don't have to think. I
Hmm.
don't have,
Yeah.
there's an aspect sometimes I'm like, oh, like what's going on in this family system or like what's going
Yes.
on here that like this person's going off the rails. But yeah, it like, I don't know, soothes my soul
Mm.
and makes me be like, okay, maybe my life's not as wild as I think it is sometimes.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And speaking of like the three, how like this third child kind of it's been wild for you. I also found that with like our third one really threw a wrench in things. And I don't know if it's that now we're like more children to adults,
Yeah.
whereas when it was just one or two, it was okay, at least one of us can handle one while the other one handled the
Yeah.
other. And then now with the three, it was bam, our world totally just kind of almost exploded, and everything had to change.
Yeah.
Everything about how we were doing life with two really needed to shift.
Yeah. Well, and obviously I don't have another experience to compare to at my own, but there's times that I'm like, okay, how would this be different if my first two children weren't
Mm.
boys or that my, other two children didn't have some of the struggles they have?
Mm.
We debated having a third child. I have always wanted three. My husband, he was like, I think I'm
Mm.
okay with two. And he had said, like, when I hit 40, we're done. And, we decided, all right, let's at least try for the third.
Okay.
And the clock was ticking of his 40th birthday approaching. And
Mm.
it wasn't happening. We were trying for a while and it wasn't happening. And so I was coming to a place of just kind of within myself accepting that, okay, it may be just these two. And my two are pretty crazy and pretty wild. And so there was a
Mm.
part of me that was like, okay, like this this is a lot already. And so maybe this is for the best. And so when I did find out I was pregnant with the third, there was a major, oh crap. Oh my gosh, what's happening? Like I was really
Yeah.
excited, but also like, oh gosh, like what is about to happen? And by no means, I do not regret having my daughter whatsoever. I'm so excited that I have a girl, and it's so beautiful to watch my boys come into this other part of themselves, to this nurturing piece of this
Mm,
little baby. But
yeah.
it's been a lot. And, all of my kids are exactly 3 years apart. And it worked really well for the first two, that age difference.
Okay.
The middle one to the youngest, I don't know if it's just, again, the dynamic of three
Mm,
or just his personality, but he is stubborn
yeah.
and
Okay.
headstrong. And so, again, it's
Mm,
really interesting because while, a 6.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old are much more self sufficient than a baby, I have
mm-hmm.
almost felt like the demands of me for the older two have been, I don't know, have increased in certain ways that I don't feel like we're necessarily present there before having a third. And I don't know
Mm,
if it's
mm-hmm.
just they're needing more from me because I'm not as available because I breastfeed, or the baby needs mommy, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, that it's definitely been really hard to just find any kind of sense of family normal. I don't know if that's the
Okay.
right word, but
Yeah.
like, because it's been a major adjustment with 3 kids.
Mm, yeah. 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 That fact that is like, what is our new normal or the new rhythm that
Yeah.
you can get used to?
Yeah. And my oldest, he has severe food allergies, he has ADHD and
Mm,
and anxiety, and so there's just a lot that he requires from us, and that is hard
mhm.
because a lot of times with his emotional needs, it can throw off the whole family in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And
Mm,
so there's a lot that's required to be giving there at times. And so where we're like, okay, we're getting into a routine, but something sets him off, and now things are not the way they used to be. And
okay.
he's really upset that it can be hard. Like,
Mm,
I thought we were finding a rhythm here, right? I thought we were
yeah.
finding a new normal or a new system, and that gets thrown off. Or like we're all sleeping, and now the baby just decided to go through a new leap phase, right? And she's not
Mm,
sleeping. So
yes.
it's hard when, yeah, you're not able to find that rhythm because you just end up in like survival mode. And I think
Oh.
that that has to happen at times, but there's a point at which your body's like, when is this going to be done?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to the question that I asked all my guests, and I didn't mean to skip over it. It just
No.
I like dove straight in. But even like thinking about all of that and the definition of balance itself, what is your own definition of balance? And maybe how has that changed with adding this third child?
So I feel like balance is a tricky idea or concept when it comes to motherhood or parenthood. And I think there tends to be this idea of like balance is something you arrive at, or like you achieve this like final place of balance. And I like to think of it more of, how do you pivot? That balance isn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily going to look like all the scales are even, but that there are going to be times when visually it looks more out of balance, right? Where like more time or more resources or more energy
Mm,
is being given to this other area or one particular area of life because that's what's needed. And
mm,
then 6 months later, it may be shifted and pivoted to another area. And so I like to think of it that balance isn't like, okay, the scales are all okay, and we've got this like thing, this like well-oiled machine, right, that's
yeah.
working. But it's more of, how are we like pivoting and shifting to what is
Mm,
happening now, and that recognizing that really what has to happen is there are going to be times when maybe my mental and emotional well-being are not top of priority in a certain period of time. I've really been trying to just wrap my mind more around of like seasons of motherhood,
Yeah.
and like reminding myself that this is not forever. This is a period, even if that period is a month or a year.
Yeah.
And so that where there are parts that maybe I'm not able to give as much to myself or to this other part of myself or my family,
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that it's forever. And so is it, thinking of balance, like, is it sustainable, even if it's just for a short period of time, right? Where maybe more is having to be given because the baby is not sleeping. And so it's requiring me to be up
Hmm.
long hours of night at night, and I'm exhausted during the day. And so, that part of me that craves getting some kind of physical activity in, some kind of movement, some kind of exercise, and that would help me to feel more whole. I'm not able to give time to that for
Yeah.
now, and sleep is more of a priority, or just vegging on the couch because I don't have
Mm.
the capacity to do something else. So I for me, like, balance is figuring out what works best for you and your family at this time, knowing
Hmm.
that it is going to shift and change depending on the seasons that you're in, and or that your child is in.
Yeah. And it sounds like there is a piece in there that is about accepting where you are right now and choosing to give that time or energy or space to these other specific things, knowing that there will be a time where you can focus on these other things.
Yeah, because I've definitely found myself at various times, frustrated or just like almost angry, like,
Mm.
oh, why can't I do this thing that I want to do? Or why
Yeah.
are things different, right? Why I used to be able to do this, or, I'm a therapist and I have a private practice and I have a separate kind of coaching and consulting business. And that has been one of those areas at various times in
Mhm.
motherhood where I have these businesses, and I love that. I love having that part of myself. It's where I get to have a creative outlet. It's something that I've
Mm.
created for myself, and it's really important part of my identity. But there have been times when I've not been able to give to my business what I would like to give because
Mm.
of my family's
Yeah.
needs. And so there've been moments where I've been angry about that or frustrated about that. And getting to a place of, again, recognizing that this is for a period of time, this is not forever, that there will
Mhm.
be a period of time that I can come back more into this. And so I've been able to approach those times with more of an acceptance, right? Like, I don't fully like it, but I'm accepting that by
Yeah.
not trying to stretch myself thin and like force this thing to happen, I'm actually achieving, probably what we would call more of a sense of balance, where I'm not over committing myself to all these things
Yeah.
and even more exhausted than I already am. But yeah,
Oh, yeah,
finding that
absolutely.
place of how do I accept that this is what's happening for right now, even though this is not forever, and can I be okay with that for this season?
Mhm. And what's coming to mind for me right now too is this how oftentimes as moms we will compare ourselves to other
Oh my
people's
gosh, yes.
circumstances and kind of that the image that's coming up for me is how the putting down your kids and then having like a few hours in the evening to just like do whatever you want and comparing yourself. So like for me, I never had that. My kids, they were they liked to sleep next to someone.
Yeah.
So they were very much contact sleepers. And we co-slept, and I have had myself and I've also had clients who talk about how it's frustrating seeing other moms be able to put their child down for bed and then like leave and everything's great and they have a few hours
Yeah.
to themselves. And it's that comparison piece that really robs us of our ability to look at things differently or to accept our circumstance
Yeah.
and make the changes for ourselves that we need to make based on what we want versus what everyone else might be doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, with that comparison of asking, like, is what I'm comparing, myself to this other person or this other experience, is that ultimately what I want? Right? Like, is
Mm,
it, where I'm jealous that this mom, is able to have all this time for herself, but one, is that real? How much is she actually getting this time for herself?
yeah.
But also, like, for me, we've had children that have allowed us to be able to put them down and to
Mm,
walk away and to, you know, fall asleep on their own. And yet at the same time, there's times when I'm like, I would love to be able to just kind of cuddle with my kids,
mm,
but I don't sleep well then. They don't sleep well
yeah.
then. And so, again, this comparison, what works for somebody or what is, what they're able to do, it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong, right? That, like,
Hmm.
you are choosing, or that your kids are struggling to fall asleep and that they need you to fall asleep with them, right? That doesn't mean that, like, oh, you shouldn't do that, Kayla, because you need to be able to have this
Mm,
time at night for
yeah.
yourself, right? It just means, like, that is what works for you guys. That is what works for your family. And it doesn't mean that I'm doing something wrong if I'm not doing that, or you're doing something right if you are. And I think comparison is it's so hard, because as women, I feel like we compare so many things about
Oh, yeah.
ourselves and about our life. And now with, the age of social media, it's so easy to compare, not always comparing realities, but comparing what we think it's
Mm,
supposed to be
yes.
like.
Yes.
And that, I think, gets us, that idea of, I've got to achieve this state of
Hmm.
balance, or I've got to get this thing different. But why? Like, are you trying to change this thing in yourself or in your family because you think you're supposed to? Or because, like, if it really doesn't work for you, okay, then yeah, let's work on finding a way to shift some stuff. But don't do it just because you think it's what you're supposed to do.
Hmm. Yes. That's so spot on. And it takes giving yourself some time to think about, like, what is it that you really want
Yeah.
for yourself and your family, being able to give yourself some time to reflect on what that is versus just looking at what everybody else is doing. Not to say that that's never like the bad thing to do. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, looking at what other people are doing can give you ideas. It's when you
Right.
compare what you believe their circumstances are to yours.
Right. Right. No, and we can learn from people, right? Like, this is what has worked for me. This
Mhm.
is how I've been able to do it. But again, am I looking to this person to tell me what to do or give me permission to do the thing? If that's the case, then we need to ask ourselves why. Why are we asking that
Mhm.
permission? Or, why do we think that they're the person that gets to tell us how we're supposed to get through life or motherhood?
Yeah. And you touched a little bit about your son who has food allergies. What has that been like for you?
It has been a journey. I saw this thing on Instagram last night. Somebody posted something that said, I never, before I got this diagnosis for my child, I never realized, like, I knew I would be anxious, but I didn't know how anxious I would be. I knew I
Mm,
would learn new things, but I didn't know how many things I would learn. I knew this would be hard, but I didn't know how hard it would be. And I was just like, yep, yep, yep. Yeah. Like, it just resonated so much. He was diagnosed at 6 months old with a severe egg, dairy,
mm,
peanut, nut allergy. We
wow.
had known that something wasn't quite right from pretty much early on. He was really struggling to gain weight. He would break out in these, I mean, we're talking like 2 months old, break out in these weird, weird rashes and bloody stools, mucousy
Mm,
diapers. And so I was doing all the things I was told, cut out dairy and soy from my diet. We eventually had to go on some specialty formulas and stuff, but always kind of just had this gut. Something wasn't right. And
yeah.
we had a situation happen where he was thankfully exposed just topically to egg. He never ingested it because
Mm,
his whole face swelled up. And I fully believe, given how severe his egg allergy is, that had he ingested it, which, like, one of those soft foods you give babies, I don't know that
Yeah.
he would be here today, given how bad
Mm.
it is. And so, you know, you talk about seasons of life and this balance where you don't realize how much food is a part of life
Oh,
until
yeah.
it becomes a problem. And
Hmm.
so at different parts of life, it's not felt as big of a demand put on us, right? At 6 months old, a year, he's with me. I'm choosing what he gets and what he doesn't get.
Yeah.
That's not as hard. Well, then you start going into preschool or you start going to elementary school, and there's more risk of exposure and, you know,
Hmm.
not just ingesting, but people touching. And so it's not just I'm having to teach my kid, but I'm having to teach everybody around him what to do if he has an anaphylactic reaction, what to do if there's an
Yeah.
exposure, what he can and cannot have. And so it requires you as the parent to kind of constantly be in like the state of hypervigilance to a
Mm.
degree. And at the same time, not let it take over your life. And
Yeah.
to, you know, you talk about balance, I think with his food allergies, and I'm just kind of processing this as, you know, we're
Oh,
talking
yeah,
here.
of
Like,
course.
I think part of the, you know, talking about balance for me has been what is the balance for myself? And then also helping him to learn what is the balance between, yeah, anxiety is actually healthy around food allergies, right? Like he needs to have that.
Yeah.
We need to have this of,
Hmm.
nope, you can't just pick up whatever you want and put it in your mouth. We have to read labels. We have to find out what ingredients were made in this. And then the balance between having to have that awareness, but also not, you know, of not living our life, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
being able to do things that are quote unquote normal, being able to not feel like the world is just this constantly dangerous place and that he can't live a normal life. It is a constant battle within for me as his mom, and then also trying to help support him in that, because
Mm.
he does have to have an awareness, you know, and we've talked with
Yeah.
him since he was a toddler of, you know, can't have milk, he can't have eggs. He has successfully passed his peanut challenge and nut challenge, and so he's no longer allergic to those.
Mm.
But this is something he's going to have to deal with the rest of his life. And it at this point, there's not a cure for it. He's in an oral immunotherapy treatment that has helped to slightly desensitize him. So they call it basically like one bite safe. That if
Okay.
he were to ingest by accident eggs or milk, the risk of anaphylactic response would, you know, is minimal or
Mm.
is lessened. And so again, it's just this constant balance between having to be kind of hyper vigilant, feeling like almost like a helicopter parent with him, but also,
Mm.
no, I can let you go. And you need to have
Yeah.
independence. You need to have freedom. I have other kids that need me. Like, you are okay, you know, reassuring him in that. So it's definitely been a journey. I feel like I operate now probably on a day to day more, you know, not in that highly anxious state, which is good, but it rears its head at times. He went to kindergarten last year, and
Okay.
that was really hard for me. In
Mm.
one, it's just hard, I think, sending your kid off to kindergarten in general,
Oh,
but
yes.
he had been at the same daycare for 2 years at that point. And so you build
Mm.
trust, right? You build trust with
Yeah.
these people that are caring for your kid, not just because they're his teachers, but because they know what he can and cannot eat. They know to call you
Hmm.
if something seems off. And so now you're sending him to this new school. What is that? What are they going to do? Are they actually going to keep him safe? And that was really, really hard. Excuse me, really, really hard at the beginning.
Mm.
And we're actually a military family, so we'll be moving this summer. And
Okay.
so it's going to be the same thing
Yeah.
again. You know, we're moving to a new school,
Hmm.
and do the administrators understand like he has to have 504 accommodations? Do they understand that like, no, you can't just keep his EpiPens locked in a closet somewhere else? Like, he has to have them in the classroom. The teacher has to know what
Yeah.
to do. So, you know, it could be easy to just throw yourself completely into this and give in to that place of anxiety. But that's where trying to just reassure myself in those moments of like,
Mm.
it's going to be okay. And if it's not okay, like I can pull him out of the school, I can access other resources, that kind of thing. But yeah, this has been, it's a constant
Mhm.
evolving situation for us as he grows and,
Yeah.
hits other developmental milestones and food becomes an issue and other things. And so, getting connected to organizations like FAIR, which is the Food Allergy Research and Education. They have a lot
Okay.
of resources and
Mm.
support for us as parents and in helping to educate schools and that kind of thing. So yeah, that has definitely been one of the biggest hurdles and a part of
Mm.
motherhood I never envisioned for myself when I was having kids.
Yeah.
Um, but is a constant ever evolving journey for us, not just, me and him as his mom, but really as our whole family, because it really does impact the entire family.
Oh, absolutely. And what has been one thing to make to help with that anxiety piece? Because I mean, I was just thinking as you were telling the story, I even got like goosebumps, even just like imagining having to experience that for myself for one of my own kids and
Yeah.
always knowing like at any point they could accidentally eat something or
Yeah.
one of their classmates just being really friendly, offering them
Yeah.
something and what 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 has helped you with that piece of anxiety?
I think three things. I think one, educating my son, honestly,
Mm.
has been a really big part of that because when my anxiety creeps up and it's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I'm reminded that he will be the first to ask somebody when they offer him anything, does it have milk or eggs? Like he will ask that
Mm.
in times when like, buddy, like, no, there's not like there would not be milk and eggs in a banana, right? Like, so I think
Yeah.
reminding myself that we have educated him, we have taught him from young, to always
Mm.
ask before he has something. So that, I remind myself of that. I think connecting with other food allergy parents has been
Mm.
really helpful. I was able to attend last October the FAIR National Conference. It was in Orlando, which is not far from where I currently live. And I told my husband, he didn't go with me. It was just me. And I said that I left that conference feeling like, oh, like I'm not weird. We're not abnormal that like he has a separate sponge that we
Oh.
use to clean his dishes from somebody else. And so
Mm.
it helped to normalize some of the places where like there is a little bit of anxiety, but recognizing that like this is a healthy level of anxiety here. And it's not something that I need to just do away with, right? So connecting with supports, connecting with other people in that
Mhm.
community. And then honestly, I think the third has been to just vocalize it, whether it's to friends of mine or to my husband, where, for example, the start of kindergarten, we had gone through this whole process of sitting down with a school and helping to put a 504 accommodation plan in. And it was a big ordeal to get to that point.
Mm.
Met with the teachers, all of this stuff. And within a couple weeks of school starting, his teacher quit. And so we were going to have to go
Okay.
through a process of new teachers and subs.
Mm.
And it was a panic for me. Like it was this, oh my gosh, do you understand how much work it was to get to this point? To get like, okay, I trust these
Yeah.
people. I had built a relationship with them even in just a couple weeks. And what I had to do is I, had moments where to some of my girlfriends and to my husband, I said, look, I recognize that this is just a really anxious state that I'm in right now, but I just
Mm.
need to tell you what I'm feeling. Like I'm
Yeah.
so frustrated that we did all this work and we built these supports and they're not there. And I'm really like, I know it's going to be okay because again, he knows not to touch
Yeah.
anything. The principal knows, what is going on, but I'm still really scared. And so being able to just kind of externalize it a bit helped me to get it out of my head and gave me like, okay, take some breaths. We're going to sleep on it. In the morning, we're going to just email the principal to say, what's the plan? Right. So being able
Yeah.
to just verbalize it for me and to kind of
Mhm.
name it helped to take a bit of the intensity and power of that anxiety away. And that, again, yeah, it is reasonable and understandable to be scared that now there's going to be this new provider or this new teacher in my
Yeah.
classroom, but that I have resources, I have, advocates at the school that I can still contact. I can still reach out to. My son knows what he's allergic to. He's
Yeah.
really good about telling people that. And so just trying to remind myself of those things really helped me to get through that. That was a really challenging time. It was also like right before I was having my third baby. So it was just
Oh
like
my
awful
gosh.
timing
All of
too.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm really glad we're having this conversation because the other thing that pops up as you were talking about it is how being able to talk about that and be open with others about what we're experiencing can combat that shame piece. Like you
Yeah.
were even saying, it's not weird that I have this separate sponge, or it's not, this is a reasonable amount of anxiety to have about the safety of my child. But when
Yeah.
we hold all of that in, it just builds within us like, oh, there must be something wrong with us, or I'm the weird mom, or we're the weird family.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think also if you're being met with shame by people, those are not your people. Those may
Mhm.
not be your people. And
Yeah.
those may not be the people for you to vent to, for somebody not in the food allergy community to say like, yeah, we use a separate sponge for their dishes. Like they probably are like, what is wrong with you? What, like, yeah, that's kind of, oh, you're a little too, anxious
Mhm.
about this stuff. Right. And I've seen that, thankfully not myself, but I know of a lot of other parents who their own family, isn't supportive of it,
Mm.
and I'll be honest, some of me, there's a part of me that's like, I don't know that I can fully blame these people that are bringing some of the shame, because honestly, people just are not educated when it comes to food allergies. Like, yes, it's not right what they're doing. I don't want to be around them if they're going to treat me and my child like that. But
Yeah.
also, like, food allergies is just something that's not been addressed in our culture, I think, in a real
Mhm.
understandable way, to really recognize that, like, no, this isn't just like a food preference. This isn't like that funny commercial where like their head blows up and is swollen. Like, this is
Yeah.
a life-threatening disease. And so if you're finding that the people you are venting to are meeting you with shame or judgment, then those are probably not your people. Maybe they can serve another purpose in life for you. Maybe they're the people that, like, yeah, you can get to watch your kids when you need a break, but maybe they're not the people that you vent to about like how hard this season of motherhood is.
Mhm.
They, whether them judging and shaming may not have anything to do with you, it may have to do with their own insecurities or their own struggle, but that if that is what verbalizing and identifying as your struggle is not being met with that compassion from these other people, that doesn't mean you should stop sharing. It just means we need to
Yeah.
find somebody else who can actually meet you in that state and can provide that compassion and that support for you.
Yeah. How did you find your community?
I'll be honest, I think there are parts of me that have found my community, and there are parts of me that
Mhm.
haven't found my
Okay.
community. And I think for a couple of different reasons. I think the community that I do have are they're my really good girlfriends that we all went to grad school together. We lived and worked at a really unique point in time in our life. Before any of us were in serious relationships, before any of us had kids, we all lived in New Orleans. And I think only two of us are now in the same place, but we all still were on a group text that we, support one another. And, majority of us have kids. We're all social workers. So we all have, just very similar things going on in life. And so it is a place where I can vent without judgment, without shaming. But because my husband is in the military, we move every couple years. And
Mhm.
so it's been hard to find kind of that on the ground sense of community. We had been in Hawaii when I had my first son. And then we moved right after that back to New Orleans,
Okay.
where I had community. And so we were just starting to kind of build that piece back in, and then COVID happened. And then
Oh
we
my
moved
gosh.
in the
Yeah.
middle of COVID, and I had my second
Mhm.
baby in the middle of COVID, and we moved to Florida. And so we're about to move in a couple weeks to Virginia, and here we just did not have, because of COVID and just because of where we're located, we just didn't get a chance to really build that community here. And
Mhm.
so it is a part that has absolutely been lacking for me.
Mm.
And where I have found that support has been a lot of times through those girlfriends, but also through different Facebook groups. And while it's not necessarily like what I would encourage everybody to be like, yes, your whole community should just be like in in this, social media
Online
platform.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, but it has met a need for me
Mhm.
at various times, especially as a mom of a child with neurodivergency, with food allergies, the military component, that I've been able to have community in different ways or have connection in different ways that have, again, going back to seasons, have been able to sustain me in certain parts for this season. When we move this time, my son, he's super social, and he didn't really have a lot of playmates outside of school. And we have not had much of a community or support system here.
Mhm.
And I've said to my husband, even before we knew we were moving, I said, look, this next move, we have to be intentional about finding community, not just for our boys, but for ourselves as a couple, as
Yeah.
individuals. I think just the move here in COVID just really threw that
Mhm.
off in being able to, build community, even with the school, right? Like the daycare, you weren't able to even go in and meet other parents until,
Yeah.
just a year or so ago, or 2 years ago. And so that's just been really, really challenging. And so
Mm.
I am hopeful with this next move that we can, through intentionality, create that community for these various aspects of life.
Mm.
To be able to have those people that I can vent to and can support me, and that I can be that for them too.
Mhm. Yeah. And it does. Sometimes we're lucky and we stumble upon this community, but oftentimes it does take some intentionality to build it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things here, you know, I don't think I realized sometimes just how big a part of our life the food allergy piece is until I have
Mhm.
found people that are part of that, unlucky is not the right word necessarily, but unlucky community, right? Like nobody like chooses to be in that. And there have been
Yeah.
a few community events that have been sponsored like around Halloween for kids with food allergies, like special trick-or-treating
Mm.
events, and being able to connect with other parents very briefly there. Unfortunately, we don't live near one another to be able to have that community, but it's recognized like, oh wow, again, you see me, I see you, we need connection here. And so
Yeah.
that is something that, where we're moving, I've already begun trying to look for like what is available in the
Mm.
community. There are some support groups, there are some organizations that, sponsor events for kids and families. And so like that is one
Mm.
aspect that like, yeah, I'm not saying that that's where my main community is going to be, but that is a part of me, a part of our
Yeah.
family that is a big piece. And so
Mhm.
being able to have, supports, yeah, that are there for me. I'm having to have some intentionality in seeking that out, because it takes cultivating some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Again, it's not, we would like for it to just kind of fall in our lap, but it doesn't majority of the time, I think, happen.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing your story and some of the struggles that you experienced. But do you want to talk or touch a little bit on your own podcast?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Raised to Empower, and the main audience is for women and mom clinicians, whether they're a therapist, mental health provider, and being able to support them in not just like the day-to-day pieces of like building a practice, but
Mm.
also recognizing that there are just systems at play that just make it hard to be a woman entrepreneur, a mother, a woman in
Mm,
general. And so
yeah.
the show again addresses things from, a kind of practice business building standpoint, but also looking at what are the things that we can do individually or collectively, or what are issues that we, should be aware of that, can impact us. I've done a series on like maternity leave and private practice, because
Mm,
if you are an entrepreneur and work for yourself, you don't get
yeah.
paid leave, right? So like, how do we still journey into motherhood and have this thing that we desire while
Mm,
also having a business? And so looking at those kinds of issues that are just unique to women and moms, and especially in private practice. So it's on, I think, Spotify and Apple Podcast, that people
okay,
can find that show there.
great. And where exactly are you licensed in? Because you mentioned, or in your bio, it says you're a
Yeah.
multi-state licensed.
Yes. So I am licensed in Louisiana, Hawaii, Florida, and Colorado. And I am about to be licensed in Virginia because of we're going to be moving there with the Coast Guard. So yeah. And I know like there's the LCSW licensing, or
Hmm.
licensed clinical social
Social
work
work.
board.
Yes.
Yeah, like they're about to start. I know several states, Louisiana is one of them, just approved like the compact, which will
Mhm.
allow people to be able to start working with clients in a variety of different states. So that'll be really good for, those that aren't a mental health provider that are
Mhm.
seeking therapy, because you'll be able to just have more access to other
Yes.
providers, and really finding people that like are what you
Mhm.
specifically need to work with. So yeah, so multi-state practice, not necessarily by choice, the military forced it, but it is what it is.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, thank you. And if people want to get a hold of you or reach out to you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah. So you can either contact me through my website, raisedtoempower.com, or my practice website is just my name, ashleycomages.com. And you can send me an email through the contact page on there. I'm also on Instagram at Raised to Empower.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to come out and joining us today.
Thanks so much, Kayla.